Start coming in like. That's like. Back end. And that's
Getting a smaller view. These are.
Figured out. I think that's the.
Yep.
So now I spent 5 minutes down there on.
I see next season there.
So we enjoy it.
This land comes down.
That's a little theory.
Right. I'm not.
Right. Yeah, a little bit of a problem. I'm sure what extent.
Supposed to.
Laura. 6 hours.
I think.
We had to clear the door.
But these comments that I was gonna give them to Laura. That really is. We had always some ideas.
We're gonna be.
Oh, yeah.
I log in.
Yeah, well, I got issues with my eyes, so I can't wear my glasses. They'll tell me. But they're doing this. But this I know, it's a reason I think that's what I'm saying. See, this was the law.
This guy.
It's like a.
Two separate headlights.
I do this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not
That
safe.
way, Jim.
I don't, especially with deer running.
These at least. They were in the distance, driving like a computer glass. They have prison.
Okay, as long as you guys got a plan.
that Realign.
Check in with her.
So I could see it.
I know her. She-
Yeah.
She's all set.
What's it next to you? Normally been, I've had Y games.
Yeah. Where you from? So
Eagle here. I mean, you have research man. Use. Control.
And why can't?
Yeah.
Heard all about the transfer.
Brian and Pat, how are we doing on folks arriving in the room?
I was just adding it up. I have at least 13 listed for quorum, so we're great. We can begin.
Very
Thank
good,
you
very
for
good.
everybody for making the effort. Yeah, we're not close enough to even have to really worry about it or write down names. We're good. Laura, are you in position where you feel like you want to do the beginning section, or do you want me to handle it?
I'm happy to handle it. I know Ben's there in the room as my alternate, and I'm happy to defer to him if he'd prefer, but otherwise I am ready to go to get us started through the first few agenda items.
I think that would be fine.
Okay. Awesome. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making the trek into Lansing, and greetings from the great state of Texas, where I am at the American Society for Agronomy conference. So thanks for your patience with me joining you remote today. What we'll start with as our welcome this afternoon is we'll go ahead and hopefully, Jim, you're able to capture everybody who is participating online. And then what we'll do is we'll go around the room and ask for everybody to announce themselves who's here in the room so that those participating online can see who is there in the room. Brian, do you want to start since I can see you on
Sounds
my
good.
screen?
Sounds good. I'm Brian Burrows, one of the co-chairs and representing statewide angler groups lot on the council. Ventura, Mr. Barber.
Doug Vita, Michigan Aggregates Association.
Frank Edouard-Gishik, United Tribes of Michigan.
Adam Wygant, Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, GRMD.
Jamil, GRMD Water Use Assessment Unit.
Megan Tinsley, Michigan Environmental Council.
Rachel Proctor, Consumers Energy.
Melissa Grassman, Jetco Solutions. Brianna Hannaford, Jetco Solutions.
Dave Hamilton, retired from the Nature Conservancy.
Dave Ventura, representing statewide riparian landowners, Michigan Lake and Stream Association.
Kelly Turner, Michigan Potato Industry Commission, representing ag irrigators.
Katie Lindstrom, Bar Engineering Company. Megan Napier, AKT Careless.
James Cliff, Deputy Director of Eagle. Pat Staskevich, American Waterworks, representing both our supplies.
Tom Frazier, representing local government.
Lena Pappas, GRMD.
Damon Gersner, Michigan Seed Repair Association. Go.
Winery ECT.
Katie Micah, Eagle Office of the Great Lakes.
Trisha Hayerman, Eagle.
Megan Cameron, Eagle.
Penny Merrick, Eagle.
Ross Homer, Eagle.
Great, thank you very much. That's everybody in the room, Laura. Laura?
All right, great. Yes, yep. Sorry, it was just struggling with my with my microphone for a second. All right, thanks everyone. Appreciate you going through our roll call. At this time, since we do have quorum here today, I'm going to ask for any additional edits, amendments, or updates that are needed to our minutes from our last meeting in October.
I received some just general minor language changes from Katie Lindstrom, as well as verifying Dave Hamilton's notes from the models committee for 2 items regarding, the first item being the noted county pilot project. We had specified that, Dave Hamilton noted yes, and you don't need more numerical models. So I think more or less just saying,
Well, I changed that to whatever.
okay, so this has been updated,
No, I mean, I sent the changes.
okay, and then
Did you get it?
I don't think I received.
I had a number of changes. I'll send them again.
Thank you.
Do we need to postpone approval of the minutes if we have some more changes that need to be sent?
There were a number of changes.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Dave indicates
Okay.
that there's a number of changes, so we'll hold that and we'll make sure to approve those at next month's meeting.
All right, thanks. Bree, would you mind making a note to help us all remember that we'll need to approve October's meeting minutes at the December meeting when we reconvene?
Yep.
Thanks. Okay. Moving on from that, I'm going to ask for an approval for today's agenda, or if there are any objections, amendments, things you guys need to add or change about today's agenda. And hopefully you received that by email, but if not, it should be posted on the Water Use Advisory Council website, so you can grab that, as well as it appears to be on the screen.
I move to adopt it as presented.
Second.
All right. We don't usually do roll count votes for these, but I'll ask if there are any objections or concerns.
None in the room.
All right. And I don't see any online. Okay. As we usually do, we have 2 public comment periods. We like to use the first one for public comments related to agenda items, and then we'll take the other one at the end for pretty much anything that's relevant to the water use universe. Are there any public comments on today's agenda items?
Not seeing any in the room.
Okay. Not seeing anybody's hand raised or anyone unmuting, so we'll go ahead and go past public comment. And Brian, at this time, I will go ahead and turn the chairing duties over to you so we can start going through the committee reports.
Great, thanks. So to start out today, the bulk of what we have in front of us really for agenda items are committee discussions. With data and conservation efficiency, probably next to nothing, more minor updates, since we're not bringing forth any recommendations with our report. Due by the end of December, we're really kind of focused right now, particularly on whether there's recommendations and content for it. So we're going to start out with the models committee this time. Dave's going to walk through a couple of different recommendations that the models committee have been working on. And then following models committee, we're going to have the implementation committee just hone us back in on the report drafting. So go ahead, Dave.
All right, so I'm going to start with the timeliness of the site-specific reviews. And we had talked about it last time. There had been some concern on it. We got a small group together, worked through that. And so we got something that everybody's agreed with, that's worked on this. So just to remind everybody what this is about, is a 10-day time period that the department's required to have a decision back to an applicant on SSR. And the fact of the matter is, if that doesn't happen, that in some cases there's way too much work that has to be done on it, can't be done in 10 days. And so, but the Auditor General did an audit of the program. They found that 54% of the SSRs were not completed within a 10-day period. And so they nicked the department on this. And so the department needs to do something to respond to that. We thought it'd be good for the department to come up with an idea as to what would make the most sense. And the department provided us with some information and break things down into 3 categories, which seem to make sense. The categories, first one was administrative review, then desktop geology review, then a more intense technical review. And we looked at the data that they gave us, which was for 2023 and the first quarter of 2024. And found that 82% of the administrative reviews were completed within 10 days, versus 95% of desktop reviews were completed within 30 days, and 96% of the technical reviews were completed within 30 days. So we talked about, should we go into the statute and change the requirement? And as we talked through that, we decided, and this was a unanimous decision, everybody's worked on this, that no, it doesn't make sense to open up the statute for this minor of a change. And so we didn't want to do that. If the department goes forward at some other point for some other things, it'd be good to clean this up. But we didn't think it'd be a good idea to open it up for this. So what we recommend is that the department continue to work as quickly as possible, that they complete the requests that they have within 10 days where they can. But if they can't, because it's too technical, there's more work that needs to be done, or they need more information, advise the applicant within the 10 days that they will complete within 30 days the review. And if it is so complex, I really need more data, more modeling, or whatever it is, they would negotiate with the applicant saying, okay, this is the data we need for you, and just work out a schedule for when that will be done. We thought it would be important for the department to commit publicly to this. But then there was some discussion, so how do you do that? They can't make a rule change that would basically say, we will do this, that doesn't technically meet the law requirements. But we thought that it's important the applicants know. So what we kicked around, and we're open to the department doing something else, but we thought that, they could have something posted on the website or on the tool user site, or when somebody asked for an SSR, that this would be explained. So that would be a possibility. We also thought it would be good for the department to report based on these categories, so that everybody will know how's the department doing within these 3 categories. So are there any questions on that recommendation?
Okay, just to note that Marianne had updated the statistics from January 1st, 2023 through November 7th, 2024, and I didn't have time to get that into the slides that are here today, but we will get that
Okay,
out to you.
well, I mean, this speaks for what the time period we had, and those were the
Yeah.
numbers then, so I think that's good enough. And if you want to show it's gotten better, that's great, but I think this was the basis for our recommendation.
Laura's raising her hand.
Or,
Yeah, I'm not sure if Mike Frederick is on, but I didn't want to miss that he had asked a question by email about the department basically making a public statement about what the procedure is going to be and having some concerns about essentially the department publicly saying, hey, we're not going to follow the statute. And so I didn't want to let that be forgotten. And at the same time, wanted to kind of put to the group, what's a good way for the department to share the information that, hey, this is an internal procedure. We want people to have a clear and transparent understanding of how we're going to try to get through site-specific reviews timely, while understanding that sometimes there is just no way that they can get done within 10 days. And also that there's a lot of, I think, reluctance and understandable concern about opening up the statute simply to change the number of days that the department has to respond, especially since we know that, somewhere in the neighborhood of half of them are getting done within 10 days anyway. So I wanted to bring that up for discussion. And Mike, I don't mean to steal your thunder if you're on. I just wanted to make sure that everyone's aware of that.
I don't see him on the line.
any,
Yeah, I just, speaking for the department, I think that's right, that we would be a little nervous about coming out with this statement that, we're not gonna follow the law. But there are some moving parts right now following the audit. I mean, we're entering into a lean process improvement. Specifically looking at our SSR process, and so we should have like formalized what the current workflow is, what our idealized or recommended workflow is coming out of that lean process improvement. And then also, that may lead to discussions if we think resources are part of that issue. But to just sort of set the best baseline, it's things that you guys have been talking about and are pretty aware of. But so does it completely remove our liability of why we're not following the statute? Not necessarily, but I think we all recognize that if we start reporting out the metrics in these three buckets and you're sort of establishing three new trend lines, that with the process improvement should sort of help inform whether we're heading in the right direction, what resources are needed, and just whether a statute change is needed. But, we're flying in a little bit of a risk zone. If somebody came and really wanted to make an issue of why didn't, that's great, you got it done in 30 days, but the statute says 10, like, that's true.
and I guess the point is it's happening now.
Yeah.
And this is, I think there's value in letting people know that you're still gonna continue to try to get 10 days, but practically speaking, it can't happen in all circumstances.
Well, right.
So at least let people know.
Because otherwise we're gonna get beat up. I mean, we can make 10 days, but we can deny them on insufficient information to process the request. And then we've got stakeholders stacking up against us that,
So, yeah, the unknown is the most frustrating thing. If it's gonna be 30 days, then so be it. We can just plan. What is the ramifications right now of Eagle not meeting the 10 days? You say, okay, if we put it out there, you say, here's our guidance. I know the statute says this, but this is our guidance and we're working through some processes right now. What is okay, fine, you're 11 days. What happens other than a slap on the wrist?
Well, currently there is for the conventional 10 business day SSR deadline, there is no consequence for going past that other than reporting on our timeliness. And that became an audit issue, and presumably the lean process improvement was identified as part of the Eagle's corrective action plan to address the audit findings. And correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that And when all is said and done, the auditors are gonna come back and do some kind of follow-up on it. And make a call about, okay, Eagle, did you address our concerns or not? The only other, but there is no other statutory consequence for that 10 business day deadline other than that. The exception, another exception is what I call, for lack of better words, the alternative analysis that was written in as part of the 2018 amendments. And that does specify that the department has either 20 or 25 business days to complete its review, and if we go past that, then it's issued by operational law. And to date, we've only had 4 attempts for an alternative analysis. The first 2 were administratively ineligible. They were over 1 million, 1 MGD maximum. Third attempt was administratively incomplete, closed and returned. The 4th attempt was resubmitting that third try. Was administratively complete. We got the extension to go out to the 25 days. And it ended up being denied for 2 grounds. Primary of which was that there wasn't enough stream flow available to authorize as proposed. The second was we identified some issues with the way the modeling was conducted.
So I think, right, world according to Adam, which doesn't have force of law. I think all these pieces and your recommendation that we track these metrics at least puts us down a road, and it shows all of our cards to stakeholders, and it gives us all a little bit better idea of what these 3 things look like. I mean, it'll indeed show us, you know, are we moving the simpler administrative approvals through quickly and meeting the intent of the 10 days, slightly more complex, that it's really kind of, we all kind of understand it's probably not realistic to move those through in a 10-day time frame. How are we doing with that? And then, you know, how many sites are we moving to this over 30-day category where there really should be associated with that some documentation that, you know, this is a complex site-specific review and nuanced.
Well, I think one thing you could add would be the notification within 10 days. It is going to go beyond. And I think that would be useful to the applicant. And I'm not sure if that meets what you were looking for as far as the transparency, but I think that goes a long ways to addressing the problems.
My comment on this is that it seems to me that this is a good interim step. I don't see this issue done. I think ultimately, you know, philosophically, the way to get it done, right, is you either have to decide that the 10 days was unrealistic and change it in statute, or you have to say the funding is insufficient to meet the 10 days, and then you gotta have discussions about general fund or permit application fee increases.
And sometimes staffing isn't the issue, it's just complexity of the site or issues.
So there's gotta be those, I think, you know, hearing that there's, you know, process re-engineering, I agree, some of that stuff, you know, administrative reviews, those are probably the level where those should 100% within the 10 days. I'm hearing that that's all gonna be, that is actively being worked on. I think from past experience, most people don't want the department to do a review and just issue denials within 10 days if there's insufficient information. I think people appreciate that they work and facilitate trying to get to a final answer. And so I think you probably struck here on the best interim guidance that shows responsiveness and the intent by us to continue tracking the subject. I see a kind of a reasonable interim measure.
Now, do we want the sentence that talks about publicly making this commitment? And I guess my question would be good enough. We just leave in part of notifying the days. I've got no problem leaving it in, but we already heard that there's concern on one side that Mike was saying that you're publicly saying you're not going to meet the law versus it's a mission of fact and you're letting people know that the situation is something. I'm not sure it's a criminal type thing, but
I think my take on that, but I've certainly deferred to the obligations of Eagle, in interpreting this one is right now, well, what's being proposed is better. And I get to worry about coming across this, communicating that you're not going to meet it, what the statute says, but in practice, that's what we've set up with the statute at the funding level. So it's happening. I think there's probably a good way for Eagle on the website to just indicate the process that she'll follow. So if they'll be notifying applicants within 10 days of whether it's complete or will require additional time, that's not necessarily saying you're not honoring the law. It's just speaking to, we will communicate back to you at the on or before the 10-day point to let you know if this is going to go over. It's not giving permission. It's not saying they've changed the 10-day deadline. I think it's just speaking to what the applicant can expect in the process.
Sorry, Laura.
Laura,
Yeah, thanks. And Brian, you just said exactly what I had raised my hand to say, which was, since the sort of meat of the concern that Mike raised seemed to be really less about the principle of, what are we proposing to do for creating these sort of three classifications of site-specific review timelines, but more about how do we handle this notion of informing users without a giant public admission of, hey, Eagle's not going to follow the statute. Maybe that's the language to focus on, and maybe instead of our recommendation saying something about Eagle shall make a public statement about this, and maybe it's more useful to say Eagle shall inform registrants, or which kind of leaves it open to say, okay, we'll either post on our website, or we'll for everybody who registers, we'll let them know that this is the process, or or something in that regard, to help address the issue and make sure people are aware of it, while at the same time not waving flags and putting up in neon lights that that we're saying, yes, we're going to use an administrative procedure to kind of skirt what the statutory requirement is, and on the also acknowledging if the 10 days isn't met, just like Jim said, there is no statutory penalty for it.
then I think maybe the wording we have works. It's soft on what exactly the department has to do. It was just suggesting a couple things. So why don't we, I'll just ask this, are there any objections to moving forward with this recommendation as it's written?
I think Jim hit it. You might want to move further verbiage that says something like, we strive to keep the applicant informed on progress. And a lot of times the staff is talking to the person on the phone. So do you want to kind of force them to kind of write a letter or take a thing? So if we just strive to keep them informed on the progress being made on their application, it seems to grasp the intent of the team.
Well, I guess I would say that it doesn't say you got to write a letter to them. It says you're looking at it. So that could be a phone call, could be email.
Well, you can't, for a recommendation, you're not putting a requirement on the department anyway.
Exactly. I mean, I think we've said what our thinking is.
Right. You got it.
I heard no objections.
I did not hear any objections either. I can certainly live with this. I think you're good.
All right.
I think that, the audit finding, I mean, short of changing that, we're not losing ground there. I mean, we're still not meeting 10 days. Potentially, there's not consequences other than having stakeholders frustrated at us, but, adding the notification piece should bring down some of the frustration maybe. And then the way we're setting these trend lines up, I think we're setting ourselves up for even greater transparency on maybe what the needs are that informs maybe a more specific rule change in a couple of years, what that looks like.
Okay. All right, so we'll move on to the next one, which is recommendation to investigate stream flow depletion by large quantity withdrawals using detailed data collection and modeling. So this is one where there's a lot of discussion in the models meeting, and most of it was making sure we've got enough detail on this to make sure we're explaining what it is the proposal is. So I think we've strengthened that. I think this proposal does that. I'll just kind of walk through what this proposal is, and then we can talk about any questions. So the question has been raised about a number of things. And one is the appropriateness of the analytical solutions that are used in this process, the effectiveness of groundwater models, and the availability of data, and does data support the use of models. And it is recognized that the variation in climate and weather and variations in irrigation, it makes a very complex hydrologic system. The impacts on the streams are therefore complex. So this is not an easy thing. It's not easy to just go out and measure something in the stream flow and say, this is being caused by irrigation, and this is an ARI. It's not that easy. So what this proposal is doing is linking observation and modeling. It's doing both. And to try to make sure that we get the information and we understand the information we're getting, try to understand the signals that the irrigation wells are putting into the streams. So we recognize that the water withdrawal system process is a precautionary approach. It is a conservative, protective measure that's been put in place to protect the stream flow in the state. The two elements of that, you've got the screening tool and the site-specific review. And for this, we are not touching the screening tool at all, but we will be investigating some of the things that are used in the screening tool. So it may give us some information when we're done with this, say, maybe there should be some changes or maybe not. And one of the things that we want to do is, as we better understand just how the system is implementing, is that we don't want an overly conservative program that's protecting too much water and preventing irrigation, preventing water use. On the other hand, we don't want to be allowing so much water that's causing an environmental problem. And so we have a system that's designed with that intention of kind of being right there in the middle. And this is something that I think will help address that and give everybody's involved in this assurance that it is indeed right there. So the study will conduct a field test for stream depletion by pumping a nearby pumping well and model the source of all the water that's coming in to those pumping wells and evaluate the watershed budget, which is a really important part of all of this because that is something that has not been done yet. And this program is really looking at the water budget, which is the real question that's at hand as to is there enough water being taken out that it's adversely affecting stream flow to a degree that is a problem based on statute. So it's going to integrate a field experiment with modeling study. It's going to empirically demonstrate stream flow depletion. It's going to monitor the entire water budget, which again, I think is really critical in this. It's going to build a regional scale model. It's going to be able to then reconstruct what we're seeing in the detail as well as what's happening at the larger region. It's going to test existing analytical approaches. This will require partnership. I think that's a key that we do want to stress is that we need irrigators, farmers to be involved in this, that we need their data. They need to believe that this is a good faith effort and that we're all going to learn from this. But I think that that is an important part of what this is calling for. So that we'll be bringing stakeholders, members of the council, other interested parties together in this this study. So people that want to be involved in will be able to be involved and be able to provide feedback on the study design. They'll be involved so that they understand that, hey, if their field or their Vermont wells will be observed, monitored, they'll understand when somebody's coming on their property, they will agree to it. That this is okay. They want this data to be gathered. If their wells are being used either for part of the public test or other information that's going to help with the study, that they would be part of that decision of that agreement. And that there would be regular meetings with the involved community to make sure people know what is going on in this study. This study is not being done in a vacuum, although I don't know if anybody has done a study quite like this anywhere else. There's been interest in doing something like this in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin did do a very detailed study that we provided to the council a few months ago. And they're interested in going further from what study that they did, doing something more along the line of what we're proposing here. So while we will not be paying for any work in Wisconsin, they won't be paying any work here, there will be collaboration. So as they move along, we'll be able to learn from them. As we move along, we'll be able to provide input to us and be able to learn from their experience. So there will be collaboration, but no crossing of dollars. So during this project, we expect the following outcomes. That there's going to be, we'll be collecting empirical data demonstrating stream depletion from these wells. There will be collection of data on a wide variety of things, including evaporation and transpiration. There will be the creation of a regional groundwater model that will pick up the details of the detailed study, as well as enough detail in other areas to make sure the pumping wells are being adequately simulated. It'll be a chance to evaluate and compare analytical approaches that are used. There's a proposal, or part of this package is to gather data into an educational component that it can be used for educating irrigators in other parts of the state, students, any other interest groups that are interested in what this is showing us. There'll be an educational packet. And these findings will be published. They will be very public. So the test will be conducted in a watershed with existing high capacity wells that where there is impact, but not necessarily documented impact on streams. Again, there'll be a detailed local test near the stream that will be designed to explicitly draw down the stream so that we'll be able to measure that. Recognize that actually is quite a bit. They did this in Wisconsin a number of years ago. It took them 1,200 gallon minute well to draw down the small stream so you could actually see the impact. So you have got to pump a lot to be able to see the drawdown. But we'll be tying that together with the other wells and other monitoring wells to be able to observe and document, and through modeling, how do we determine what is drawdown or depletion elsewhere. So the test, let's see, a feature of the test, we will identify a site or sites where hydrogeology implies liquid stream depletion is likely. Design the test or series of tests to observe the response of the system. There'll be monitoring wells that will be installed, there'll be stream monitoring. And we anticipate it should be done for more than one season. It'd be good to involve us 2 and maybe even 3 if there's enough money for it, but it'd be good to get monitoring done through several seasons. That will help deal with the variation that you naturally see in the weather. And so all sorts of monitoring wells, piezometers, stream gauges, stream temperature profiling. So let's see. One interesting thing that is being proposed here, because the question comes up a lot, is that run a test where a pumping test is done through a irrigation well and the water is diverted elsewhere. And then run it again, so it's not going to affect stream flow of the test. And then run it again with the sprinkler system running, see what the differences are, and there are other ways to accommodate in that, or how do we evaluate that? So that would be something, maybe a small part, but would provide some interesting and potentially valuable information. Let's see, the test watersheds will include an American groundwater. We already said that. Stakeholders will be fully engaged in the test. And then on the last page, there's a budget. And one of the big items is high capacity well pump rentals. And that's if we have to go in and actually put in our own high capacity well and bring in our full pump. And that would be that there's not in place a willing irrigator that could do the pump test for us. That one of the advantages is in this under the control of the study, and it can be done exactly as the study wants it to. But anyway, that's a pretty big item, but it might not be necessary if in the right place you've got the law that's in place to use. So $1.2 billion is the total. Any questions? Yes.
Putting online.
Okay, are there any objections to this thing?
Yeah, just one question, David. I want to read through it. I'm trying to figure out how much data you would need on actual withdrawal. You have to measure withdrawal amount. I mean, you're measuring flow on the withdrawal side of it on a
Yes.
detailed test like this.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, most pumping wells are already, metered, so that is a
So
number.
it would have to be a metered well, if
Yeah.
metered wells in the area.
It's not information that will be shared, but
Right.
again, as part of, that would be necessary. Right?
Yeah, how, when you pick a test site, how will you be able to judge whether that test site is indicative of what's gonna happen at another site?
Well, you're never gonna find a site that's applicable to the whole state. It's just not gonna happen. So we're gonna pick something that we believe is gonna demonstrate what we're looking for in this. And, the lessons that we learn, we'll figure out how do you apply it elsewhere. But it's not gonna be just one for one. I did a pump test here and it applies, so that just doesn't work in Michigan.
Thanks.
I asked the same thing in committee, Frank, and, another way I would use to explain it is, it's the a lot of it's gonna be the modeling components of this being paired in one location with kind of enhanced data and empirical pumping results. And so you can think for a minute, like, they're gonna pump hard enough where they are measuring a stream flow depletion, and then they're gonna come in. I'm saying this real casual, so hopefully I get it right, but, they're gonna come in and put together models that explain and match that. And then they're gonna use larger spatial scale models to kind of build off of that. And one of the things they may find out in trying to match their local model to the data is they may determine that, hey, this variable on the soil there, transmissivity, seems really important to get that if you really want to match what's really happening. So the insights can be sort of like a sensitivity analysis, and it may help them learn, like, some of these variables we knew were important, but we didn't know how important, are showing up as significantly more important than other ones. And so if you went to a different area that had completely different geology, southern Michigan and northern Michigan, the actual results from them doing it probably won't apply, but it may still help them figure out how to go forward better representing those other places.
And modeling is the key to the variability that you're talking about. So from site to site, water management area to water management area, it's gonna have some different hydrogeologic features, and it's through models you pick that.
So Todd, Feenstra had some good comments on trying to get, maybe an individual or a private entity to agree to this. And more than likely, we would have to maybe go out and put in a test one just to be able to monitor and do it. If you did that, where would all that water go? Do you disperse it around the land that it's on, or do you pump it off site? Because my only thought is that could change the variability as to what we're seeing.
That's exactly right. And if you want to see an interesting video on that, there's a 1960 video in Wisconsin on Little Plover Creek where USGS did a study. They piped that water way away because they didn't want it. So the answer to your question is you've got to pipe away so it's not going to affect your study area.
But if we use an existing farm field, that water's coming right back.
Well, so that's why one of the proposals was, let's do this two-part test. One, you do pipe it away, and that's the theoretical, that's the best way to do a pump test.
But what is the majority of large quantity withdrawal users
But
doing?
then the second part is you come back in and you sprinkle, irrigate while you're doing the pump test.
Okay.
Which is what a lot of farmers are doing now anyway, and the department has real concerns with that. This would help address that.
Okay.
Question.
Yeah, I just want to, if we have to do that, it would be nice to match what currently people are doing. And I do believe most of them are keeping the water on site in some way. It's just that it's being utilized in different capacities.
So that's why that's.
Yeah.
I think it's a good thing that you're proposing this for a project to be done, because I know this would answer some of the questions and concerns we heard several years ago when we took the tour of the, what was it, Monsanto seed production and all the farmers there and everything. They were telling us that what they were doing wasn't affecting the water, and yet our model says it did. So this is something, I think it's timely. It's certainly a good thing to do, and I'm looking forward to see the results of it.
And that, I get that response. I mean, as we talk about this, there's a lot of support for it. There've been questions, but a lot of support for this idea. Laura, did you have a question?
Yeah, and mine's really more procedural than anything else. And particularly pertaining to this proposal, maybe even more so than the previous one on recommendations for how the department's going to potentially move forward with how they handle site-specific review. And that is, it's been getting discussed in the models committee for quite a while, but the email today, I think, is probably the first time that most folks have seen the detail of what you've written out, the budget, and you know, and kind of what this field project is going to look like. So while I am in complete support of doing a field project, from a procedural perspective, I feel like we should probably give folks some time to read through the proposal, rather than trying to take a vote on it today. And I just wanted to get that out there because I know you had kind of you had asked for if there were any objections to it, and I don't have objections. I just want to make sure that folks do have a chance to read it, digest it, come up with any questions or concerns. So, you know, because we want to make sure that we get it right in the report that comes out in December.
Yeah, I was thinking on that. There's two strategies. Obviously, we have a report coming up, so I want to be appreciative of everybody's time in drafting the final product on time. While not forcing somebody closer. Dave, I think it would be important that we check to see if everybody likes the concept and if anybody's objecting to the concept of it proceeding. If people do, there's, you know, we have consensus support for it. We can kind of wait until next month, give people the opportunity to provide kind of language-based updates, or I suppose it's also possible to consider it, you know, supported, but then work through some wording things as we go. That the only pitfall with that is everybody will have a couple more chances to review drafting. But if it was, you know, material of great consequence, changes the budget, changes the function of the project, that would be a problem to edit that later. Do you have a preference, Dave?
Well, I mean, that's why I was asking the projections, because if somebody really thinks it's a dumb idea, let's get it out of the table so we know where we're at. Versus if you just want to think about it a little bit more and maybe a little tweaking here or there, I don't have a problem with that. But I do want to know if there is a serious objection.
That's good. Does anybody have strong objections to this proceeding? And if so, share them. I'll say that if you don't have objections, then you can probably live with it, and we'll handle whether there's slight improvements to it next. But are there strong objections?
Todd Feenstra has his hand raised.
I'm not gonna say,
Go ahead, Todd.
I'm not gonna say that I have an objection to it. I guess what I would say is it's hard to know if you even have an objection to it. The rest of the modeling committee hasn't even seen it yet. So, and there's definitely been some changes. The last version I have is a page and a half. There's a lot more language in here, and there's a budget in here as well. So it's really difficult to even raise an objection if we haven't had a chance to look at it yet. Or a concern, if we want to soften the language a little bit.
Based on the feedback from the models committee, addressing the issues that were there, so.
I had procedural question as well. So we have talked about this a lot, but this was the first time that I saw the last discussion put on paper. And then I did see Brianna had sent it out, but it didn't go out to all the whole models committee. And so just to make sure everybody who had this conversation has the opportunity to put eyeballs on, this is what is being recommended to the full council for consideration. To me, it makes sense that it goes out to the whole models committee. There's a time frame that they have to get comments back, then that can be built into it, so that then this could be sent out a week before the December meeting, so that the council then has an opportunity to see if there are any edits or anything like that to it. It's just really difficult as well to get something a couple of hours before her meeting. And to be able to digest it and to be able to know if there's any.
It was supposed to go out last week, didn't make it for some reason. That was intentional. It was supposed to go out to everybody, not just me. I'm not sure what went out to her saying.
So I, maybe I have a little bit mixed up.
Should have got everybody on the mailing list for the council.
Yeah, but I noticed there were some people that weren't on that, so I don't know if there's some lists. I think we need to, as a council, take a look at and make sure that we're including everyone on those so that we can avoid this in the future. But I also don't want people to be unhappy because they didn't have the opportunity to look at it. I think we still have time to be able to give everyone the opportunity to look at it, provide comments if they want, and then all of that can be considered then for approval in December.
Well, I mean, I think that everything was raised in the models committee's been addressed in this. To go through this fine. I mean, I've got no problems.
I'm just, like, this is the first time we've
No,
seen
no,
the
I agree.
budget
It's,
stuff.
it should have gone last week. Unfortunately, it didn't. I didn't like it coming out 2 hours before the meeting. That was not my intention. But, so it makes sense that, so we've gotten over it. You had a chance to read it. You have more chance to look at whatever. If you have, comments, but I mean, I feel pretty good, consistent with what we talked about policy. So if there's anything, just be minor tweaking. But I would think it would be not consequential. So I don't have a problem if you want to. We haven't heard any big objections. We have heard that you want to read it somewhere. And I would just say, get any comments that you have, please, as soon as possible.
Put an official deadline on it as a group so that.
Next week. Next week.
Let's pick next Friday. Gives everybody some extra time to review it. I'm not hearing clear major concerns at this point in this meeting with the concept of it. So I don't think Dave's gonna be wasting his time to just receive those, make adjustments, hear from people, that would result in like a high probability of wasting his time for next month's meeting. So let's say that, we will follow up. We will make sure that it's, indeed sent to the entire council list, following today's meeting. And then next Friday gives more than a week. And then Dave, we will make sure that you are the recipient of that feedback. You can dispel it, work through it. Feel free to check with us if you encounter like big stuff, but we'll make the adjustments and get that out with lead time before the next council meeting. So everybody sees sort of the amended draft if there's amendments done to it. And it sounds like there's a pretty good probability we'll be able to handle it at that. As soon as you redraft one and we get it back out to the group, we probably want to make sure you get that draft over to the drafting committee so that they can make sure that it's sitting with a spot in the report. So we can have this quicker turnaround after the next council.
Okay, sounds good. So please come to me as soon as possible. Well, except that. The final thing is to talk about the including the stream flow depletion calculation in the tool. And I just want to give the council an update on that. So we talked about it quite a bit in the models committee. There's some unease among some members, which is not very well defined, but we need to talk that through and figure out what it is and address it. I think that what is being proposed is sound. We'll figure out what the unease is and try to deal with that. But at this point, we are not recommending this right now until we get that done, which means we won't have it done for this report. I don't think that that's a fatal thing for this because we don't want to implement this before we make a decision on the transmissivity and the sortivity work, which is going to be sometime early next year. And so there'll be a package of changes coming to the tool. But having said that, I don't want to push this off too long either. I'd like to move ahead with this. We don't need legislative approval for this, but I do think the department needs to know ahead of time if this is coming, so they can be prepared for it. It's like they'd have to prepare for the other changes in the parameters. So that's where we are on this. As far as substance goes, there's no change in any of the topics we talked about last time. You will figure out what any of the unease is and if any changes are necessary.
Questions about that? Okay, I'll just make one comment. I know I'm gonna apply a little pressure to everybody here, including myself. We make recommendations, we have things that aren't working nearly as well as they could, and so we have to provide recommendations for how to improve it. It takes work, but whenever we are close, it's coming into focus, there's a lot of consensus around it. Can still be heartburn, something might not be ready, but as we move forward, whether it's the last one, what we agreed that we would do for a week and a half, 2 weeks, get thoughts and opinions. I put the onus on all of us. If you have concerns, we really need to do the work to explain them, make them specific, and then bring them to everybody else so everybody can help provide solutions to that so we can still move forward. This is one that has been recognized as a not great component of the program for 15 years or more. And so as we get close, if we're not there yet, that's okay if there's reservations, but we need to all work to bring those reservations forward, talk about them, find solutions to them so that we can still make progress.
So I would like the council to make a recommendation early next year. So people will use these next few weeks to try to work it out, but it'd be nice to come back to the council in December for a decision in February, the next time.
I think it's just, again, we're consensus based, solutions have to work for everybody, but we can't kind of hit the end of the rope and go, oh, I'm just not there yet. If you're not there yet, you got to say why. And we work better as a group because there's a lot of perspectives. If 5 of us think we're there, it might be because we're missing 5 people who haven't explained to us, but we're not seeing why we're not actually there. But when we're not there, we need the help, the very active participation to figure out how to create solutions to those things. So a little bit of a pressure thing, but on a couple of these, we got to stay with that in front of our minds.
And I would like to thank the Models Committee. We have very good participation in Models Committee meetings, and there's been a very active discussion on these things. And I think the recommendations are better because of that. That's all the recommendations.
Thank you for all your work, moving that forward and shepherding that.
Sorry, I'm getting text messages. I think Mike Frederick is upstairs. He said they're trying to call. Oh. Let's start your text messages. Someone went to you.
Thank you for trying.
Day late, $1 short.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate that. And we'll huddle up afterwards and we will talk about the things, the action steps. I have notes, and so.
There's a comment from Laura, it looks like.
Okay, go ahead, Laura.
Hey, just wanted to make sure that I share with the group some of the points that I had brought up in the Models Committee in the spirit of kind of making sure that everybody understands, at least from my perspective, the concerns that I have so that we all know and can be working on potential solutions for how do we move forward with replacing what we all hate, which is the half max rule for distributing out stream depletion, but do it in a way that we have good, reasonable certainty that what we're replacing it with is actually more representative of what's happening in the real world. And so the concern that I've brought up is that while logically Web squared appears to be something that is more representative, while it looks like it would work better, while Zipper and some other folks have done work in watersheds in other areas of the country that is attempting to answer the question of how do you distribute stream depletion impacts from a water withdrawal. One of the things that concerns me is you know, we always talk about how, you know, the upper Midwest and maybe Michigan in particular, with its extensive glacial history, with it, you know, with all of the things going on with its subsurface geology, is a little bit unique. And I've heard and am not quite ready to say that I agree with the notion that trying to do some kind of a field experiment to demonstrate what's a better and more realistically representative way of just of figuring out how to distribute stream depletion is impossible to figure out in a field experiment. And so I want to keep trying to get to something that we can say, look, a model is great, but it's only as good as the data that you're able to collect and the information that you're able to use to be able to calibrate it and verify it. So I want to keep working toward a solution where we can demonstrate, and this is not just for, you know, our own purposes, for, you know, for scientific purposes, but also to make sure that we're building trust among the user community to make sure that we can actually do something to demonstrate that, hey, we're changing this. You know, it could mean some pretty significant changes in some watersheds, meaning the difference between you know, you can get approved in under the tool or you can't. This is how we know that it's better. And whether there is a similar type of field experiment to what Zipper did that could be done in, you know, in our unique glacial geology, or whether there is some other kind of verification or calibration of this model that could be performed that's not just a desktop exercise, that's really kind of what I'm looking for, and what my concern has been with just saying, hey, it looks better, it's more logical, let's go with that. So I wanted to throw that out there to make sure that the council understands that at least from my perspective, and other folks can chime in, but that's the concern that I have, and I definitely want to work on that, but I'm not a field scientist, so I don't know exactly what an experiment or calibration or verification looks like. I just know that I feel like we should be doing something besides a desktop exercise to demonstrate that, yes, this is actually more representative of reality. So throwing that out there for the future discussion.
Well, we will schedule a miles committee. We need to have that discussion.
There's a comment for Buddy as well.
Well,
Like a check.
Laura hit on a lot of it, but part of I understand what we're doing here. I get it. And the more science-based data we can gather, the better off we are. We've all agreed upon that many times. But I'm just trying to wrap my head around what advantage to somebody like a grower to let Eagle on their property to take all this information. There's no advantage to them whatsoever. We understand the advantage, but it's going to be a hard sell to them. And I think we need to think about that and how we're going to convey that to somebody that's got a large quantity well, that, hey, we're going to come out there and do a bunch of testing and not use that information against you. That's going to be the hard sell in my book. That's all I wanted to say. I think what we're doing going forward, we're heading in the right direction. We just got to make sure that we can complete the task when it comes up.
I think you're referring to the first thing we were talking about with the field study. And I think that's a really good point, Buddy. And we actually are going to need help. I mean, this council represents a lot of various interests. We're going to need help from everybody to try to make sure we get the participation that's needed. It is a trust building exercise, which means there has to be a little bit of trust to start out on it, but it is a trust building exercise. What I would say is that Wisconsin, where they've been working on this, they've seen really good results and really good buy-in from the farmers, who have been actually pretty excited with results that they've seen. And in fact, I've heard anecdotally that some of the monitoring that went in from it, there was one farmer was commenting to saved him from irrigating an extra boron, and he saved more money on not having to irrigate one time we spent on all the monitoring equipment. So that kind of thing, I think makes us all feel good about. First, the data was useful to him, and was able to use it and actually save money with it. There's a lot that goes in with this, but I think we do need to get people bought into this, and we're gonna need all of us working to make that happen.
I actually think it'll be easier than both of you led on to. I mean, the premise that we're doing it for is that a lot of water users who are regulated have a distrust in the current platform, that it's may not represent reality. So the value gained is, if you don't trust what we have and we're trying to do better, this is the process of doing better. So if we don't, you're going to continue on using the program and the tools that you may not love currently. I think that's the value of participating.
No, we're not gonna negate somebody's registration through this, right? I mean, we're kind of veering into, with this pilot, we're veering into triggering a depletion to do the scientific work, and at the end of the day, you know, I would assume all users will be allowed to go back to the volumes they were allowed to be removing
Yeah.
prior to the study. So I don't know that there's things individually lost in the near term, but there's potentially a lot of things gained for refining the tool in the long run.
Yeah, and most of the studies just monitoring while people are doing their normal activities. They irrigate when they need to, they stop when they don't need to. It's just what's going on, and that's part of the reason why I do it over 2 years if we can, is to pick up some of that variation.
So they would have to be worried that the department's A, gonna like go back on an already approved registration, or B, the results find out that indeed there's not water. And again, we would be asking the users already registered to dial back. I would think those would be the threats in the back of their mind. And neither is the intent of this.
And I think another thing that's is just as likely an outcome is that people who want to use more water will find out that although the system's telling them they can't get more now, they might very well be able to have access to additional water, because this might show that it might show the other side of it too. We're looking at the negative, but there's also a positive side. I think it's just as likely there, because most of what I heard from users was that they thought we were nuts. There was plenty of water there. Why are we telling them that there isn't? And so I think that it could go either way.
I think, you know, Jim and Lena could speak more to it, but, you know, of the science that we think is coming in these areas that, you know, we're showing depletions on, this is the next level of science that we're gonna have to do and solve anyway, so that to the extent that this is getting ahead of it and being proactive, and then working alongside of other pots of money we have and initiatives, and audit to improve the watt, all things considered. I don't think there's a issue
That's
with
my
that.
understanding too, Adam. I mean, through the history of this program, maybe there's exceptions, but I don't know when we've done a systematic upgrade of our thinking based on models or an accounting procedure where we've ever gone back to people with a previous registration and sought enforcement impairment. We do it at the time of new registrations, but we haven't done much of that. So we talk about it, we come close, right? So the Web Square proposal was not to do it retroactively. It was to put it in the screening tool moving forward. We're working on downstream accounting, and we're still just trying to figure out how many people might we have not registered, but we never talked about what to do with those if we do the accounting different. And this would maybe provide a test well that is not a currently registered withdrawal. We're going to make our own well to heavily pump and to make sure we can find a depletion. And then they're going to model the other existing wells in a region. That's a new modeling platform. We have not yet on a new modeling platform gone back and told past registrants that is now going to rebut their former presumption based on their former processes. We talk about this even with Eagle, right? Like with the zone Ds. What is the standard? What is the department's definition of enough evidence to rebut a former presumption? We're not there yet. We haven't done that. So
I think we see that in some zone Ds where, as I understand it, there was a change too, like initially where there was an assumption that the stream bed wasn't connected and there was allowed, you know, it was, if it was bedrock, it was approved automatically. But what we think then is when that went away, and now what we know, you know, we may have some units that are already overdrawn and the department's not gone back retroactively to say that was a mistake and you were registered before. And by the way, you know, we need you to cut it 50%. We haven't done that. We try to deal with it as it sits in the watershed right now, even and it's potentially overdrawn. And this takes it to the next step of like, okay, there's the stream, we're overdrawn, but is there an issue? And how can it inform improvements to the WAD? So.
Thank you for all those comments. Appreciate it. Is there any more before we move on to talking about the fun, exciting report drafting? Seems like a better, more meaningful discussion.
Todd, this is invoiced again?
Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to share with the full council a couple of the things that we talked about in the models committee when we talked about this. You know, we've got a field experiment designed, and I agree with a lot of the comments that are going, you know, and we're talking about here. But there's also an opportunity still. You know, the Midwest Water Stewards Group has got years of data. And one of the discussions we had was we have weather patterns here. You know, 18, 19, and 20 were extremely wet. If we would have done that work during those years, we may get different results than looking at the data over a 5-year or longer period of time. It would behoove everyone, I think, to try to encourage that spirit of cooperation and find some of that common ground, which is really difficult. We've got a wide variety of interests represented around the table, but it is possible. We talked about it at the modeling committee. You know, there's advantages to that. If there's a grower that's willing to participate, you know, and we can convince him that it's in their best interest, you know, there's 8 years of previous data to draw on. And that's a huge advantage, especially, you know, we couple groundwater with surface water measurements. So there's long periods of record there that would help with the understanding, the interpretation, and even the modeling. I think that's a venue that's not mentioned in that proposal, but that would be really wise to try to take a hard look at that first. I guess the easiest way to put it when we try to answer that question about what's the benefit of the grower and how do you convince growers to participate in this, if I were to put it to the council, you know, if I was sitting in front of all you today there, look around the table and say, which one of you is willing to personally bet $1 million in property assets that this study is going to not harm you or may benefit you? I mean, those are the decisions that the farmers and the growers are looking at, is if they're participating, they have a lot at stake financially. And so they're going to look at it with a really pragmatic eye, and they're going to ask hard questions. I get asked those questions a lot. So to try to go quickly or ignore that, I think is just going to hinder what we're trying to do here. I think just having maybe some more open discussions about that, and maybe even including a couple growers in some of those discussions to get their input, I think would be wise. It's not an opposition to what we're trying to do here. We've been trying to do this for a very long time. We've got a huge data set of stuff to look at. You know, it makes sense to be cooperative in that rather than combative in that. And I think the council can take a great step in that direction if we're wise and we're thorough about how we think through this and how we encourage cooperation. And that was one of the primary things that came out of the Wisconsin study, right? Even published, was how important it was to establish trust at the beginning of the process, not through it or, you know, at the end of it. So that's a whole jumble of stuff, I would say. But there's a lot that's out there already. The question that I guess I would have for the full council is, you know, how prepared are we to try to move forward together on this versus hey, we need to make a fix and let's make a fix to this. And then let's just see where the cards fall afterwards. So that's my 2 cents after talking with a couple hundred growers across the state and hearing their concerns. And then doing this monitoring work for this long. It's a huge resource. It would be really wise, I think, to take advantage of that.
I think that's a great idea. It's obvious with the area we're talking about doing this study that we need the cooperation of farmers, and the historical data it can be an important part of it. But I think what you're touching on, actually, there's no reason to wait for the study to be able to use data that exists. I mean, I think studies can be done with using the information that the farmers have to help us better understand what's going on in some of these water management areas. So I don't think we need to have a big elaborate study to be able to use that data very effectively and help the program make determinations. And we hear it all the time. The farmers say, you know, I get recovery. I don't think I heard anything. But it's like that data really needs to be analyzed so you can understand what is it telling us. If it's telling us that, that's great. That's going to help the program a lot. So I think we should try to find a way to use that data regardless of this other study.
I agree, Dave, and I've been a proponent of trying to do that for a very long time. The hurdle is this. The hurdle is you've got guys that have millions of dollars or $1 million in assets, and you're asking them to put it at risk. And that's the perception of it, if not the reality. And that's the question, right? And I guess my question would stand for the individual council members. If you had $1 million investment, what would you be willing to risk? Would you put that on the table and say, I'm not sure what the outcome of this is going to be, but I'm going to go ahead and bet $1 million that it's going to be okay?
I want the information.
Well, I think that thinking about it critically, if you're looking for opportunities for like the study that we're talking about to merge and receive the benefit of some data that's been collected, I would say you'd want to start with those water users that have participated with you, Todd, that have had some data collection going, because in those cases, it seems as though it's not really a large bet. We've heard that the tool is probably over predicting depletion in those situations. And for people who have invested in some data, it's not really like a true 50-50 shot of whether new data collection works out better or worse. So, I mean, I would agree if you started with a current water user who has no data collection, hasn't participated in some enhanced efforts, then maybe it is more of a gamble of what data collection would do. But we've heard that where enhanced data collections happened, there seems to be reason to believe that the tool's over predicting depletion. So in that case, if you believe that, it's not much of a bet to allow more data collection to occur. Appreciate it. This is good. I actually like our conversations and good subject matter. This is really good compared to a lot of just the governance stuff. So if anybody has more, let's stick with it for as long as possible. From the chair, I don't know the governance stuff. So it's really good. I appreciate everybody sharing.
I just have one thing. There was someone who joined with a phone number and I just wanted to clarify who that individual was, if that's okay.
Sure.
The person whose phone number ended with 14, can you just let me know who you are for record's sake? Or muted.
If you can't come off of mute, and you can type it into the chat section, just so we appropriately have record of attendance, that's great. Okay, I'm gonna keep moving while we wait for that.
Build up of what you were saying with these two different groups of farmers. Sorry, you gave me a minute to think about it.
Go.
So if there's a group of farmers that haven't collected data, I can see the opportunity for them to be to have access to the data. For those farmers who have been collecting data for more than a decade, they have that. The opportunity could be then that we figure out something with modeling. And I think with that group specifically, it's going to be important for them to understand or to know or to be reassured that that data and how it's put into a model and use statistically to get the results is gonna be important. And I think that's the piece where there hasn't always been transparency because we don't get to see behind the curtain when they're put into the, the batch tool and different things and it's that explained to people. And I think that's where we're gonna need to be able to come up with, here's who gets access to that, here's how we get to show or
I personally agree with you wholeheartedly. It's a classic problem when you use modeling to inform decision making. If people don't have a great, really clear understanding of how data is used and the functions between two pieces of data, and sometimes it's you got data about this, you got data about this, and you want to infer and estimate something that you don't measure. How models do that is really important. And it's not very clear. People aren't great at always showing it conceptually where it makes sense, but so models become black boxes and there's dreams written about people not trusting models because they don't really understand every model's different and how we treat data and use it to come up with something that we're interested in. It's critical for trust building and understanding. And it's screwed up a lot. With the use of models. So I'm saying that with enthusiasm because I'm working on a project right now where we have the same problem. And even when people try to be transparent, it can not be transparent when people are trying. Show it in different ways until you find several ways that work for all the participants. Totally agree. Great point. All right, segue on to report writing. Sorry, you are excited about it. Or Laura.
This is Laura. She has done a
Yep.
fantastic job of summarizing this, so.
All right. Well, I'm going to make this section very short and sweet. I want to first of all thank everybody who has sent me comments on the multiple rounds of kind of the introductory parts of the report that the implementation committee has come up with, which really kind of covers here's what we've done from the 2020 recommendations. Here's what we've done from 2022, which is essentially we got the money. And so what the plan is to do next is to kind of start wrapping the rest of the report pieces in together. If you have any more comments about those 2020 and 2022 accomplishments sections, please do continue to send those in. But in the meantime, I'm going to work on drafting and getting the implementation committee to give me some assistance with writing the introduction of the report, kind of our executive summary of here's what our ask is this time, making a very special emphasis on continuing funding for the projects already underway, as you know, and kind of laying out that timeline for the expectations there. Unless there's an objection from Sarah, I definitely do want to include our hopefully helpful plug to continue the funding for Michigan Geological Survey and the work that they're doing, which the legislature has, at least up to this point, kind of put forward in separate appropriations bills. And what I'll do is kind of hearing the discussion today on the proposals from the models committee. I'm going to go ahead and put those sections in as those proposals and work with Dave as he's getting folks' comments in to make sure that the draft is as up to date as possible, and give the implementation committee a chance to look through that, do some wordsmithing, and then my goal is to get it out to this group at least a couple weeks before our December meeting so that folks can read it over and we can go through any last editing changes before then it. Thanks, Sarah. She says no objections to promoting Michigan Geological Survey. I figured you wouldn't mind. But then to give you guys a chance to read through the report, let us know final edits so that we can get those last pieces in at our December meeting, and then I can work with Bree on getting our published version available. In the past, we have done a blast to the appropriations and ag and natural resources chairs for the Senate and the House, as well as the appropriate department heads for those state agencies, Eagle, MDARD, and DNR. At the end of the year, we're obviously under the statutory obligation to get them out by December 28th. We just try to do it before that because that's like the holiday. But then we plan on repeating that once we have notification of the new chairs in the legislature, which usually happens in like a late February timeline. So we'll plan on sending this out twice, knowing that a lot of those folks who are going to receive this report in December are going to be gone or in different positions by the time the next appropriation cycle goes into play. So that's the plan. And I'd say definitely coming in, it's very helpful, and we will work on making this report as successful as the last two. Unless there's questions, that's it.
Yeah, hey, Laura, good job. I do have a question based on the 2020 recommendations where we talked about the well driller trainings for improved data information. That one at this point, it says that the Michigan Geologic Survey is going to go along and conduct training. In 2020, we asked for $4,000 over 2 years of $2,000 each. Is that $2,000 per year supposed to be in perpetuity? Or was this truly a 2-year ask? And are we at the end of that $2,000 per year because we had 2 years go by since 2020? I'm trying to figure out where are we at with that.
Point
Yeah.
of information, and Sarah, if you're online, you can jump in and correct me here, but I believe MGWA was generous enough to underwrite MGS's driller training, so they didn't use
Jim, what are the acronyms? Who's doing what? These are the number of acronyms.
Oh, sorry. Michigan Geological Survey. That $4,000 was appropriate out of the 2020. My understanding from talking to studies group paid for the well driller training that Michigan Geological Survey puts on. So that $4,000 wasn't spent for the well driller training. So we rolled that in, and I'll get to this in the program update. But that $4,000 was rolled into the funding for the data gap analysis project as part of that $125,000. So
Right, not
in this,
quite.
right, in this report, then we would not be meeting that $2,000 annually for that task going forward.
Right now, we're not being billed for it. It is occurring, and it's occurring between MGS. Sorry, now that the acronyms have been established, Michigan Geologic Survey and Michigan Groundwater Association. So,
But back when the original recommendation was given, it was only for
It was 2
year.
years. It wasn't written at that time, whether it was hope that we might.
Right.
It was really just written as a 2-year financial request. And I don't really remember discussions about whether it should be done every year or whether some of the folks were thinking like, it's been a while, let's do it for 2 years, offered a bunch, and then maybe they're good for 3-4 years before there's a lot of turnover.
I thought the idea was to get everybody up to speed with what is actually required and when you're doing these things. And after 2 years, we would have saturated those individuals.
That's kind of how I remembered it.
They could get up to speed.
I
So
think it's an area that, whether or not it continues as a recommendation, I think it's something that the Michigan Geologic Survey, the water well drillers and Eagle see a lot of value from consistency and training. So that will likely continue to occur in some form.
yeah, the need for the training and the benefits from that training will continue, but whether there's need for continued funding.
Okay.
That's out my
okay.
ballpark.
Okay, I think we have Sarah and Buddy on the line. Do either one of you want to add anything to see if, tell us whether we actually got that right or wrong?
Sarah had a couple just like comments in the chat and then Buddy had his hand raised, so I'm not sure if you want to start with Buddy.
Let's go ahead. Yeah, Buddy, go ahead, jump in.
Buddy, you're muted. for talking. He jumped off.
Or Sarah, go ahead and jump
Say,
in.
did we lose Buddy or?
I think we lost him for a moment.
Every year, Michigan Groundwater Association has their annual education conference. So many drillers come to that. They pay to attend the conference, and MGS has been a featured speaker where we put on a couple of hour training and bring and earth materials in for the drillers to identify and do a practice session. So going forward, I think that there is still a need. We've only addressed MGWA members, and MGWA is maybe 50-ish% of the drillers in Michigan. So we still have an audience to get to. And so I think that we're going to be doing some additional things to get that outreach broader.
Well,
But MGWA has been a fabulous partner on this.
Bye-bye.
Is Buddy back?
Buddy's back.
I'm back.
All right, buddy, you can go ahead.
Sorry
and go
about
on.
that. Yes. Yeah, my computer just decided to shut off. Back to where I know you're doing implementation, but correct, Michigan Groundwater Association paid for that, but I want everybody to understand one thing that they probably don't understand. All the well drillers out there aren't required to come to our event, and they're not required to put accurate data down on a well log. There is no, we're not required to do that. And the ones that are already out there, it's hard to get them back and get them trained. It's like teaching an old dog new tricks. It's tough to do. So even though we're, beating the drum and waving the flag and saying, hey, we need to get up to speed on this, it's going to be a slow process. Now, all the new ones, all the young ones, all the ones taking the exam are going through this training. But the ones that are out there currently doing the work and have been for the last 25, 30 years, you may get one or two that come in. You might not see a guy for 10 or 15 years. So we need to keep that in mind.
Fair enough.
I guess just for the point of clarification though, that if we want this $2,000 to continue, that should be a 2024 recommendation because our recommendation from 2020 is done. And I don't think we can just keep going it back and saying, well, it would be nice. I think the council in and of itself should say, yes, we still think this money is appropriate to be allocated to this and not just because it was recommended for 2 years in 2020 that it continues moving forward.
Doug, I
think-
agree with you because I can't always guarantee Michigan Groundwater Association is going to foot the bill. So as long as my tenure is there, I see the budgetary necessity to do it. However, that could be not the case 5 years from now. And I think it's a good idea to keep it. I agree with your assumption.
So far in the
Go
draft
ahead,
report,
hang on a second. Hang on 1 sec. Go ahead, Adam.
So just for consideration to, for the board, the council, there's a couple other things going on as well. Like I said, the three groups, we want to continue to do education because the consistency of descriptions obviously helps everyone using the data and improves outcomes. But Sydney's working on our new groundwater database, and part of that is going to be some changes to well logic input. And without opening that can of worms, we do intend to do a Jedi mind trick working with stakeholders, but we want to offer that tool, that carrot that can build in some of this consistency and bring us back to uniform classifications and help with this. So I know that this is an area that we've got funding for in the department that will work in synergy with this moving forward in the, Sydney, 12 to 18 month timeframe. That the tool, I remember conversations with the water well drillers like a decade ago, and electronic submission and these things can be contentious conversations, but I'm of the mind that if we build a tool that people like to use. Buddy mentioned new drillers, younger, that people will want to use this tool, and rolling that out, change management, education will all be part of that new process that we're implementing.
I'm concerned because, as far as the legislature goes, $2,000 doesn't even reach the decimal point. It's way below the decimal point. It dissuades me that we'd be better off long-term if we recommend this money, if we think it's really important, which should be part of some budget that does this kind of educational work, and just kind of get it rolled into that. I think would be our most effective recommendation.
Yeah, and I'm not turning down money, but I am trying to say in a roundabout way, we have some other buckets and some other activities that education piece will be part of.
Go ahead, Laura. Sorry to
Oh.
put you on.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. Sorry. I can't see the folks in the room very well because the picture is really, really tiny. Just wanted to make sure that folks know that right now, as of in the draft report, that that educational fund for the well driller training is listed as part of the bigger package of ongoing expenses to say, look, you funded us to do these things. It's going to cost this much to keep them going. Please do this. So if folks want it somewhere else, I'm more than happy to move it. But right now, that's where it lives, is rather than try to call out a specific, here's $4,000 and the legislature will go, why are you even asking us for this? It's part of kind of the bigger, please give us this larger amount of money, which is going to be spent on, this list of things.
I think this is highlighting, like, I'll say in the data committee, when we were kind of seeing if there was any new recommendations, this one should have popped up and it didn't. I think for now, probably needs to live in that part of the report, because if we actually make it a specific recommendation, we're mentioning it for the first time in November, which isn't how we like to come forward with recommendations to do it. So we could also kind of get to work on this for this next year.
Well, there is just a point of clarity. So in our report, we asked for funding for a number of initiatives for 1 or 2 or 3 years, and we define how much per year.
Right.
Once we're beyond that time frame, we've exceeded what we've asked for. And to put it into an ongoing expense, not accounting for it in our report, I think is wrong. Because why are we doing this? Because we've exceeded our initial ask. I just want to make sure that we can tie, why are we asking with this, with the recommendation timeframe that we originally put forward in a report. That's all. I'm not saying whether we need it or not. I just want to make the tie, because how I look at this from a 2020 report, I know the funding was issued late, but as we go into 25 and 26 and 27, that's when some of these, we said it will be $2,000 or X amount for monitoring stream gauges annually. We didn't say for the next 10 years, we said it will be an annual ask. And so those are ones that I see, yeah, we should put those in, because that was in a recommendation, kind of like the hydrologic framework. There's a $36,000 annual budget for that after it's implemented. That's all. I just want to, as I went through and started tying these up, those were the issues that I kind of jumped.
So I think you're definitely differentiating between a few ongoing ones that are different, right? We've
Right.
said we wanted a certain number of stream gauges. I think on this one, I don't know what to do right now, because the original app was a 2-year, it wasn't kind of a 5, it wasn't necessarily an ongoing. There's probably utility. Seems like good discussion about doing that, how to do it. But for the original recommendation, it was 2 years, that's come and gone. And we didn't put it in the 22. So there's not money just recently derived last month for it, so it's not gonna be in the budget. So going forward, we'll have to think whether it needs to be an explicit new monetary recommendation. Yeah. I appreciate you catching that. Make a note, that may be something if we end up indeed kind of coming back around with a 1-year timeline report for next year, maybe that's something that can't be captured. So, and we'll put it on the data because we had discussed more. Okay, Laura, before I let you off the hook, we're down to the wire, so timelines. You got a draft of 2020, 2022 recommendation reports. You're gonna work with the recommendations that are approved now, the SSR and the likely new data and modeling effort. We don't, I mean, all the progress that we've done to implement, those are in those recommendations. We don't need any extra side reports about like a data committee, a conservation and efficiency update. Are any of the other committees just trying to do like a progress update, or is it all just captured in previous recommendations? Fine.
So I haven't received documents that anybody wants to add in terms of here's what we want for our progress report, but there's still room to put those in. And particularly if they, if they're not something that's making new recommendations, they're easy to kind of plug and play in terms of adding those to the report. So I guess I'll put that out as an open invitation as I'm as I'm requesting any more edits, changes, updates, and as I'm working with Dave on the new recommendations. If you have an update report or a status that you want to include in the 2024 report, send it my way, and I'll pretty it up and put it in the draft. And again, for timelines, I'm going to try to get I want to try to get this the updated draft ideally before Thanksgiving. Because then after Thanksgiving, I'm going to be at our state annual meeting. So that's going to tie up about a week between Thanksgiving and our state annual meeting. So I want to try to get an updated draft for you guys to look at and chew apart before Thanksgiving, so that then when we get to our meeting in December, we can take care of any kind of final tweaks and anything else. So that then Bree and I can work on final like appearance formatting, and then the tri-chairs can get the email sent out the door to all the relevant folks for the legislative report
Okay.
by December 28th.
Yeah, so that's what I was just looking at was we got comments can be sent into Dave about that one recommendation by the next Friday is the 22nd. Stick with the deadline, but that leaves Dave a weekend.
Make it a week from today.
And maybe a Monday to get it to Laura, who wants to get it to us by Wednesday, the 27th.
And if you can't do it, I mean, that's, I can extend it out if you guys want to say, I'll get the, like the updated draft out to you guys by like the 5th or the 6th, if that's enough turnaround time for you guys.
No, the meeting's on the 10th. We can't receive it.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to back it off, but I can if people need me to.
No, because on the 10th, we're gonna have to reach consensus on a draft of this one recommendation that's hanging out there, but everybody also has to reach consensus on the draft of the report.
Yeah.
So that's a heavy review on the 10th. So I would like the final draft of the report, and that would include the drafted changes to a recommendation. I'd like it to reach everybody here no later than Monday the 2nd. So if Laura, if you're saying, hey, I'm out and you want to get it to us on the 27th, that is phenomenal, because everybody here needs to have their time to really go through that. I'm just saying that for Dave's point, the 22nd may be the deadline, but if you have comments on that, try to get it to him quicker, because he's only going to have a couple of days to get it to Laura, who's then going to get it.
I think just a week from today, give them to me. I'll get it by the end of that week.
Okay.
Yeah, and if it does need to go out on the 2nd, because like I said, I'm gonna start adding this stuff in now, and figuring that, recommendations and questions and things that Dave might need to add to the recommendations are going to be comparatively kind of a minor component of writing up that whole report. It should be a pretty quick turnaround. So Dave, if you need more time to be able to get through those recommendations and that you receive and do edits, and just let me know, and I can say, okay, I will then wait for those additional comments and get this out by Monday. I mean, I will still have a computer there.
Yeah,
it's not like I'm going to be in Timbuktu or anything.
We're going to push up some comments to the 19th. So one full week. And then that leaves you a couple of days to do your work, call people if you need, try to resolve things, fix things, to get it in Laura's hand by a couple days later so that she can then get everything a couple days after that. All right, appreciate it. I've taken notes. We'll try to remind.
Okay, and sorry, I'm seeing a bunch of stuff on the chat come through with Buddy. I think he's still having problems with his internet, so he's.
After Laura sends it out, do we want, if you have comments, do you want to get them to Laura before the meeting on the tenth, so that we don't pile in on the tenth?
I would love that if that's okay with everybody. Laura, if you're okay
Yeah.
receiving, if people have wordsmithing, if they could send them to you, you can handle them and then maybe come with some sort of like a recap of what you received for wordsmithing, but a clean version, that would be good. We have as a group before tried to do group wordsmithing and it was a dreaded activity. So as much as you are able to send those to Laura and she can kind of do them from the calm of her desktop rather than live time with everybody walking on the screen, that'll be a
Yeah.
huge advantage.
Yeah,
Jason.
your incentive to get your edits to me before our meeting on the 10th is to just keep imagining in your mind having to do live action wordsmithing and editing while you guys all sit there and watch me type.
You'll have to walk through all of your preferred edits.
I've seen two argument over placement of a comma before.
Yeah.
So for note taking accuracy, let me make sure I've got the dates correct. So get comments to Dave by November 19th. Draft Eagle needs to send out or Bree needs to send out the draft report to the council by December 2nd. Get any edits to Laura before the next meeting on December 10th.
Yeah, I had a quick question, because I was looking at the calendar. Would it benefit you, Laura, if like they came in by the 6th, that's the meeting's on the 10th? That would be like the Friday before the meeting, or did you want it sooner?
No, the 6th is fine.
So that's by December 6th.
Target, yeah, so the subtle
Yeah,
differences, I
yeah.
think Laura's
If
gonna
you can.
Laura's gonna try to provide the draft that will both have Dave's amended recommendation plus the latest draft by the 27th of November,
If I can.
then
I'll
we're
send
gonna
out
leave
what
for
I
a
got
little
on the
for a
27th.
holiday,
How about that?
A little bit of a conference. We will make sure that they go out either on like the 27th or as a very backup by the 2nd. There's a glitch in time between Laura and Bree and others. And then if people can try to get any comments for word adjustments to Laura by the 6th, so she has a little bit of time to deal with that before the 10th, that should work.
Yep.
So
And if it doesn't,
all
you
of you
guys
can
all
go
know how
back
to
with
get a hold
those
of me,
dates.
so, you know.
Try to put those into your calendar, reserve an hour or two here and there on yours, down to the wire.
Yeah. And it is incredibly helpful that you guys have been helping out with the drafts for kind of the backgrounds on like the accomplishment and, you know, stuff that's been done already and our, you know, on our continuing funding request. So this should not be a real heavy lift because you guys have already looked at what's going to be more than half of the report.
Perfect, Dave, go ahead.
But just an aside, thinking ahead to beyond this report, is that we talked about user groups and that report will be coming in next year. I think that'll be a core topic in our next report. So I just want to make sure we make mental note that we don't forget that, because I think that will be a core topic for our one following year.
Should we have a placeholder in this report that we're working on that?
Well, I thought, I was thinking about that. I don't know, because it's like, we really don't have much to say other than we're working on it.
Yeah, I hadn't included anything yet. I'm happy to, but I kind of feel like that would be words that nobody would read just to say, hey, we're working on it.
That's
Probably best to communicate when there's consensus to communicate. All right, moving along, I'll jump and say, no reports for the data committee this month, so we won't waste any time there and we'll move to the conservation and efficiency.
Way less exhilarating than what we've talked about so far, however, well, we have our fingers in a few pots. we're trying to put together a group of people to come up and talk about some of the barriers to the irrigation pump retrofits from diesel to electric. So Eagle had a grant out there for that, and I don't think that they had anyone apply for it. We heard some background from some farmers about some of the roadblocks to them, so we're trying to get farmers and folks from the energy companies and Eagle to kind of come together and explore maybe what those roadblocks are, so that we can see if there's a way for us to kind of remove some of those roadblocks to make that happen. I know it's a little bit outside and down a rabbit trail from water use, but there's that water energy nexus, and so I think that's an important piece for us to be able to bring people to the table and talk about. The water conservation best management practice product. So the Alliance for Water Efficiency, they're still doing their stakeholder engagement meetings. They're having good progress with those folks, and we're hoping to get a presentation at our committee meeting sometime in either January or February of next year. So we'll be really interested in taking a look at those. So those were the different water sectors that didn't meet on an annual or any sort of timeline, kind of convene those together to update and create, if there weren't already created, some best management practices for them. The irrigation specialists have been hired. They've met with their advisory committee. They kind of have a plan of action together. They're going to be attending a lot of winter meetings. So there was a question at our subcommittee about, what do you mean by winter meetings? So in agriculture in general, we have lots of seasons. So there's spring planting season when all of the farmers are busy and you're not meeting then. And then you have a little bit of a lull depending on the crop, sometimes midsummer while things are growing, where there's an opportunity. We do a lot of educational sessions during that time. And then there's fall harvest season. You're not getting people at meetings. And then there's winter. And that's where we do all of our like big annual conferences. That's where farmers have the time to come in. We do a lot of education then. And so that's the target for these educators to get out in front of these different agricultural groups, kind of explain what they're doing and try to build relationships and really add some folks to the plan of action that they're going to be able to go visit and to interact with. Did respond to the request for updates from the 2024 report to the legislator. I need to probably go back, Laura, and see if we may be owing you some information, and I'm sorry if that's the case. Emily and the folks from Eagle are working on a new climate migration and water use research project. So the more we talk about climate migration in our subcommittee, thank you to Frank, we realize we have a ton of questions and things that we don't know and that there isn't research on. And so Katie Micah has done a really fantastic job in kind of synthesizing all of those questions that we have, and then being able to put that into a proposal or an ask or a request for proposal on research that will look at what is the current research, what is the data that's out there, what are the trends that we see on climate migration, what are the demographics, the economic development pieces, land uses, water sectors, maps, potential scenarios as we look into the future, because we don't know what exactly is going to happen, but really to be able to do a little bit of predictive, taking a look at some of these so that we have a better understanding of what are the water needs going to be in the future, and then what does that look like from a conservation and efficiency piece, but also information that would be helpful to the other subcommittees as well. So we're still kind of working on that concept. Katie had put together, I put together a couple of quick pages about climate migration and some of the questions we had, and she did a fantastic job of boiling that down into 2 paragraphs that will get sent over to Laura that mention climate migration, and it's just so that we're kind of foreshadowing, I guess, to the legislative body the importance of it and what's to come. So we got the thumbs up from Frank at the beginning of this meeting to move forward with that. So that will be sent to you. Laura. We're gonna send it out to the rest of our committee first, just make sure everyone has eyeballs on it, before we shoot it off to you, but those are the things that we're looking at. And if Katie Micah is on there, she can tell you if I missed anything. I'm also right. Oh. Hi, Katie. That's great. Fantastic. He did not text me, so. Issue either. My neglection to turn around.
Any questions for Kelly? Let me know if any are online. All right, thank you. All right, you queue up the next, and Pat, wasn't expecting to be here. Would you like some of the program? Are you sure?
You went great.
All right, thank you. Program update.
Yeah, well, good afternoon. This is the program update for Eagles Water Use Program. I'm going to give updates on several hiring processes in the Geologic Resources Management Division. I'll provide some implementation updates on some of the 2020 council recommendations. Provide an update on the Mission-Doe aquifer drilling. I'll show some graphs of long-term trends for large quantity withdrawals. And provide updates on calendar year-to-date program metrics. And then hopefully you'll have an opportunity to ask any questions. So first off, the groundwater and geological services section manager has been filled. That's Selena Pappas. And in the back there next to Ross is Tariku, did I say that right? Nagasa, who just started as our geologist GIS support position in the groundwater data unit, also in groundwater geological services section. And we just started conducting interviews for the 2 geologists 9 through 11 site-specific review vacancies in my unit. Those interviews are being scheduled throughout November. 2020 recommendations. So we've got a new joint funding agreement with U.S. Geological Survey that's being in the process of being signed for a total of $4.3 million. That includes installing 15 new stream gauges and operations and maintenance for those gauges through 2026. Also includes conducting an aerial magnetic survey that will be conducted to provide information on the depth to bedrock and glacial geology. That information will be used to guide the drilling of additional monitoring wells in areas of concern. And groundwater models will also be created in some of the water management areas of concern. Scroll it down. The grant agreement is currently being drafted with the Michigan Geological Survey to assess existing data gaps in water management areas of concern. That's one of the 2020 recommendations. And have Michigan Geological Survey make recommendations for additional data collection to address those data gaps. I skipped ahead. Sorry about that. Okay, yep, then the final note here. Stafford Gray is the contractor that was selected for the project to update the water withdrawal assessment tools, aquifer properties. That's the transmissivity and the aquifer storage coefficient data. Right? You were looking at me quizzically.
The aquifer properties, the transmissivity and storativity, I believe that was awarded to Fishbeck and MSU. That's who's gonna end up working on that project.
Okay.
I think we're talking
I must be getting my projects mixed up, so Stafford Gray is the one that's working on the user interface update.
That sounds right.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry, projects to keep track of. Sorry about that. All right. Moving on. So the Mission-Doe aquifer drilling. So GRMD has now received the report from the remediation redevelopment division geological services section for their drilling, which includes maps, the geologist's field notes, well construction and soil boring logs, as well as gamma ray logs for those wells. They ended up drilling 5 wells, 2 wells at Amboy Township Hall with the total depth to the bottom of the screen. The shallower of the two, 62 feet, and the deep well, 188 feet. And a third location near the Michigan-Ohio border has 3 wells that were constructed, shallow at 70 foot, the intermediate well at 123, and the deep well at 164 feet. And GRMD and Remediation Redevelopment Division will be working over the off season here in the winter to schedule additional monitoring well drilling at a third site in 2025.
And, oh, that's nice.
Well, if you could see all the map, you can see where those wells are, but unfortunately, they're in the blacked out area near the border. So what I might be able to do here, taking a real risk technology wise here, jump to my version of the slides.
Put the effort in to make us feel like that one. Redacted.
Indiana's pretty house.
Yeah, all right, forget that.
Next time.
Demonstrating some wells in Area 51.
Might be able to drop the map at least in the chat.
We'll get it. Anybody really wants to know, we'll get it to you.
Next time.
We just include it with the minutes, that will be fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I see a map in the chat.
There we go.
Fortunately, it's the size of a postage stamp.
All right, well. Good news is that 2 of the wells. There's real time, you can access real-time groundwater elevation data. And I've got to get back to share my screen here. Hang on.
It's a nice picture.
Okay, are you? Let's see it here in the.
I see it on the screen.
Yeah, it's screen, but not the TV, not on the TVs.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay,
It's okay.
That's okay, keep going, let's go.
all right.
We'll imagine it. Hey.
Okay, well, in any event, the first well, the 62-foot well at the township hall, there's USGS calls that MAW01S. It's on our map as MAW01 62 feet. There's a link to that, and there's a link, also a link to the 188-foot deep well.
Good, keep rolling.
So you can click on those links and go to the USGS website, which will have a link to the real-time groundwater elevation data for those 2 wells.
Watch this.
Okay. Slides are totally screwed up. All right.
Are you still sharing? Or you can-
It's sharing on Twitter, but not on the screen.
Yeah, my connection's good.
You know what? Let me just blast through this.
Yeah.
Let's get this over
We
with.
got some screens over there.
All right, pre-screening metrics. Total of, the previous slide that couldn't be displayed, Laura had asked, got a request from one of her members for long-term trends in tool registrations, SSR requests received, and SSR denials. So that was a slide, some line graphs showing those trends over time from 2008, 2009 through the present.
Thank you for
That's
that,
what-
by the way.
Yeah, so that will be shared at some point when we get technology glitches dealt with.
Jim, since I got a sneak preview, is there a reason that they're trending down these recent months? Or is it just off season? Is it just a seasonal effect? Oh. It's your slide. There's a trend on.
Right, downward trends.
I just wonder if that was significant. Actually, those are years. I see.
Yeah.
Oh. So there's downward trend for whatever reason.
All right, so, next set of metrics for our pre-screen reviews for community water supplies. Essentially doing SSRs for drinking water and environmental health division. From January through November 7th, Joel has had completed a total of 21. 6 ended up being zone A. 2 zone A geology pass, meaning that the pump aquifer is not connected to surface water. 9 zone B, 2 zone C, no zone D. And 2 baseline capacity replacements. $327 permit metrics for newer increased withdrawals above 2 MGD. As of November 1st, Andy's issued 1 permit. And then part of these numbers, you got 7 applications that are still in the review process. Right?
November 1st, but those
Yep.
numbers have changed significantly.
Okay, next, compliance metrics, January to November. So we've sent out a total of 93 compliance communications. Breaking that down, 4 after the fact registrations, meaning that we were able to authorize a withdrawal that was not initially registered through the tool or an SSR, but there isn't a stream flow available to authorize it, register it as billed as operated. Sent out 1 missing pump information request for a well log that did not have the pump capacity information. Now there's 62 revised registration compliance communications, so where it was as built, as operated, differed from what was registered, but there's enough stream flow available to register the as built as operated. So we sent out a revised registration, 62 of those. And then 26 communications with the property owner to try to verify whether they did install the withdrawal. In addition, sending out 15 first violation notices.
Are you seeing that trend with the 62 folks that, had to reach back out? Is there like certain well drillers that are helping, that are not communicating that? I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity for education that might help close that gap a little bit.
Well, Hannah's not here, so probably can't answer that directly, but yeah, definitely more education outreach would be good,
For
so.
the 62, for the revised registration, that's kind of, usually they'll put in a well and we have like what they think it's gonna be, like depth wise, capacity wise. Those revised registrations are usually after the fact, if something changed, like a well depth has changed. Or something.
But then they're supposed to let you know that, right?
Yeah,
But they're not, and then that triggers this communication?
no, that's what this communication is us changing and communicating back and forth with them.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
And that's all I've got. Are there other questions?
We see these numbers all the time and number of wells and everything. But I've often wondered, these permits are for wells of different capacities. Has there been any calculation about how much water these approved wells represent in a time period? in a month? I mean, what kind of? So for instance, I'm getting calls from some of the tribal leaders about, battery plants. And as you know about the, the data centers and things of this sort that have pretty high capacities. But in terms of what they're planning on using, but I'm just curious about what kind of uses are we approving around the state, other places? And how does that compare with these, what appear to be really large uses of water? And it's scaring a bunch of people when they see like 715,000 gallons, for cooling at one plant. I'm just curious to understand what the numbers that we're seeing in terms of approved wells around the state. What kind of volume does that represent? Has there been
I
any?
think we can, I don't know if Jim, if your staff's done it, but I did that years ago and they make it pretty straightforward. So they keep an updated registration list on the Eagle website and you can take all the GPM, convert it into, gallons a day. You can do gallons a month, gallons a year, whatever you want. And then you can just kind of, I once had to plot the cumulative frequency distribution of sizes factor in the Nestle just to put that into context. It's pretty easy to do. I don't know if it's already done, but
It's not something we routinely do and have on hand, but yeah, it would be simple to do. Those kind of, real shallow, forgive my use of the term, but like just a superficial look at, quantity of water, comparing one to another. It really, it's dangerous, in my opinion, as a numbers guy, as a data guy, to kind of put that out there, because there's just so many differences in how water is used, returned, consumed, or what have you. We can certainly do it, but it would come like with all these caveats and the parts of the story that no one ever wants to read. But it would include those kind of things. But yeah, as a general rule of thumb, there's many gallons of water being authorized for new uses, many that would probably shock. Yeah.
Yeah, and he does do a report every year on the water use reporting. So I mean, that irrigation as a whole, so I mean,
Right.
those numbers are.
By sector.
And I guess the reason that I asked that question is because a lot of people who don't think about this on a daily basis on what people are using, see one big use and they get really upset about it. Some legislators are looking into, well, how can we fix this problem and things of this sort. And so I've tried to steer them in a way to try to get them to understand what the process is so they can sort of figure out what that is. But I've been concerned about this and I've got to respond to the tribal leaders who in their areas are getting really concerned about these things. And so I need to have something to be able to talk to them about this use and tell them exactly how much we actually are using. For instance, I ask all the leaders to say, compute how many gallons of water are they using at their casinos? Okay, just so that we can figure out how much we're using as a tribal user. How does that compare to these other uses? And so those are the kind of things that this is a discussion that's coming up and we're going to hear a lot more about it in the next several months. And I just thought I'd raise that question. So, thanks.
Good one. And then, the gallons per minute, I typically find that that's like a meaningless unit for people to wrap their heads around. People are often saying gallons, how many million gallons per day, but that still doesn't, so, maybe I can help a little bit too, but like I've tried to also, not really trying to tell people that they shouldn't be alarmed if they hear 2 or 4 million gallons a day, but just trying to make it make sense. And I've also added it up for like what different rivers that people might be familiar with, like looking at that point, what that adds up to per day for millions. And that's pretty shocking too. Shockingly large, but I might be able to help. And if, I'm sure staff would help facilitate us trying to figure that out. It is an important question these days, making it make sense of what the scale of this is.
Yeah, Taraku, Jim and Lena stole Taraku from our oil and gas side of the house in our division, but he's sitting on some mad modeling and mathematical and GIS skills. So, he's been hired to help with GIS piece, and part of that is being able to create tools. There's a number of GIS type tools that are helpful in communicating with the public, and certainly we can look at something like this, to Andy's point, use the data appropriately, but when you have ideas like this that you think are educational and instructive, those are the kind of projects that I think Terrico is going to be working on, and we can certainly share, like when we have our quarterly meetings with MTAG and your,
Right.
your fellow tribes, help clear some of that up.
Yeah. We have our own silos in the tribal governments. And so MTAG is a good thing, but that doesn't always make it to the tribal
Oh,
leader. And those are the ones that I have to deal with. So.
Yeah, very, very familiar with that gap. Yeah.
Right, those data centers are sniffing all over the state.
Yeah.
I made a note, I was triggered at first in the last 10 minutes by Dave asking about the drop off in SSRs over a time period, and now your conversation too. So I made a note for us to discuss for next year, but maybe something we haven't done for a long time that seems logical now that thinking about it is to ask for some presentations about what the demand is going to be like for different sectors. So, when you ask like, why would the SSRs drop off? Could be anything, right? I have no idea what the sector's doing. I mean, maybe they would tell us that 80% of the tillable land has already been, in X region has already been converted to irrigation over the last 10 years. So they're running out of farmland that, needs to be converted. And likewise in the non-ag sectors, I think we're all dealing recently, maybe not by sheer volume of them, but we're dealing with some very visible data centers, natural gas, cooling evaporation, sometimes aquaculture, battery plants, and trying to understand that. So much what we're talking about is we started, the only recommendation that we approved this section this year is about SSR demand. What do we need to do to process those maybe faster, more timely? That comes into what is the demand going to be? And maybe it's time we kind of circle back around and try to get some information for ourselves about what might the demand be looking like.
And there's another factor to this, and that's that it's not just the water that's being used in these, because most often it's being used for cooling. But what happens to it when they're done with it? Is it evaporated? Or is it returned? What condition is it returned in? These are the kind of things that we can have some effect on, because if it's taken cold and returned hot to a stream, you're gonna kill fish, you're gonna kill stuff. And so is there, the idea about this economic development, and this sort of moves along the line of the climate change issue too. Because these are the kind of businesses that we're bringing in, dealing with this. The battery plant in particular. The idea that, what if it's the least expensive way for the company is going to be to not do anything with the water when they're done, evaporate it all or just return it somewhere. The most expensive is going to be if they're required to return it in a similar state to how they took it out, in terms of its temperature and everything. So, these are kind of things that sort of get out of they move beyond our bailiwick here, but we're the front end of these issues. And so I think it's important for us to think about it.
It might be beneficial to have somebody from Water Resources Division, the water quality permitting, come and talk to some of those aspects.
Yeah.
That's across a bunch. So you're triggering return flow crediting, which is part of the downstream accounting one. You're triggering the water conservation and efficiency user segment, but BMPs for efficiency, it cuts across everything.
Just for fun, I'll throw out solar farms too, because that's another thing that we're starting to figure out. That's a land use change that is coming around, and some of these farms that may be converted to solar farms have registered water withdrawals. Do they need them? Do they turn them in? Should they turn them in? Can they sell them to a data center?
Yeah, right now, a lot of those solar contracts, if there is irrigation on them, the solar company is using that for watering roads, the in and out travel for those to keep the dust down. I've seen some pretty interesting things in those contracts. And what they're not addressing is who owns the equipment, who pays for that well to be removed when they're done with it. Like, there's a bit of a hornet's nest.
There's also a whole thing about the solar thing about what kind of crops grow well in shade. And if you raise the solar panels up, do you then create some place that things can grow well? And I saw a field growing hops that they had the collectors up on top, over the top of them. And so there's the mixed use stuff. It's gonna be a big deal. And so just because solar panels go in doesn't mean there may no longer need to be irrigation water.
Good. Any other questions for Jim specifically on the program today?
Sorry, I hijacked you.
No, this has been a great meeting. Okay, perfect. Future meeting dates. Bree, did you send out yet? And we
It's been sent out to the email, but it wasn't sent out
okay,
Yeah.
all right, so
publicly.
we've gotten around to looking at meeting dates for next year. I think technically the reason we haven't sent them yet to everybody is that we need to go and, work to see if this venue's schedulable for each of those. However, if, you have pens handy, or you can wait until we just send it out, but, maybe the first one is the most important. February 11th will probably be after this next December 10th. We'll go back into a bi-monthly full water council meeting until we need to do more frequently. So first one up would be February 11th. After that, tentatively is April 8th, June 10th, August 12th, October 14th, and December 9th. So we'll try to pin these down, turn them from tentative to official. For any of you who have already might have accidentally taken like last year's or the years before and like hit the repeat sequence, they should be really close. It's basically the same. It was like the second Tuesday of.
Yeah, it's second
the
Tuesday
other
of
ones.
each month.
They should be really similar. So if you had placekeepers before, maybe you won't have pain with other conflicts. We'll work to make sure that these meeting dates work, that we can get the room, and then they'll be sent out to everybody. But most important in your schedule would probably be to put a placekeeper for the February 11th. That's that. Format's quorum, same as always. What's up?
Open comments?
Open comment. All right. This is a chance for anybody to share some thoughts about things that don't necessarily have to pertain to the agenda. I'm gonna look around the room first. For you, tell me if anybody would like to take the opportunity online. Open comments. Anybody interested in making one? Kelly.
I just wanna see if there's an opportunity for us to go through and make sure that the mailing lists are right, because I haven't gotten the agenda for this meeting since September, and I was getting them regularly. So I don't know if something happened there, and maybe it's just me. But also then, the recommendations that were emailed out today, I think there were some folks that weren't on that list either that normally get the invitations and the information for this meeting. So I don't know if things got crossed, but if we can just double check those, that.
Yeah, we've been working on getting the mailing list updated as possible. We did get people rolling in a lot. That's something I've been working behind since the people on, so we're trying to push it back as quickly as possible.
Okay, we'll do double checks. Other open comments? Online?
I've not been really online.
All right. We will close that. Inform so we can show off Robert's rules and they're gonna accept a motion with Dave. Can we get a second to adjourn the meeting? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Have fun staying here by yourself. Thank you very, very much. I know we actually went to what, about 3:30? So we didn't let out, early, but, really great discussion. And sometimes getting to the end means that, of course, is really good stuff. So I appreciate everybody. See, and have a good week.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, she worked up there in the lever and pitch it. 2 years. One for the last.
And I forwarded that. They kind of like.
Yeah. One of them.